As you can see, the New Deal's got a lot of stuff in it. So get ready. Here we go. All right, rule number 10A, election of 1932, running against a guy whose campaign slogan is, hey, it could have been worse. I don't think you're going to lose. Republicans renominate Hoover. He's grim throughout the campaign, generally weary and despondent. Remember, the Depression is a crisis of confidence, and here's this guy acting the way he was. Now, Roosevelt, the Democratic nominee, was politically active in New York. Distant relative, I think, fifth cousin of Teddy. And you can tell from his last name, he got the Dutch heritage. Suffered infantile paralysis, otherwise known as polio, following the 1920 campaign with Al Smith. Recovered throughout tremendous personal strength and effort. He really had to work. It was phenomenal. Was badly crippled and could only walk with heavy braces. Exuded charm, personal warmth. He was able to associate himself with the common man. Now, he was no common man. Very wealthy Roosevelt family, but quote, I felt like Roosevelt knew me and I knew him. More than that, I felt he liked me. Roosevelt projects great confidence and optimism. This is a dichotomy to Hoover, and America needed hope. Roosevelt's proposed program, he talked about a new deal for the American people. You got this based off the square deal of the other Roosevelt. The New Deal was never a preconceived plan. So they didn't go into it knowing exactly what they were going to do. Instead, it was a vague generalization for a couple reasons. One, he had the election won. Don't alienate anybody. And two, he had to hold the Democratic coalition together. Now, you got a lot of varied groups, like 6 different major groups in there. So you got to hold them together. So by saying no specifics, you don't alienate anybody. So slogans, things like "Happy days are here again," and everything's rosy with Roosevelt. Hoover, the worst is past. It could have been worse. I mean, are you kidding me? Well, the map says it all. 1 out of 4 unemployed. We nominate no hope. We know it went by landslide. Outcome. First off, black voters abandoned the Republican Party for the first time, both urban and rural. Remember, it's the Republican Party who Emancipation Proclamation, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. African Americans had been steady Republican voters, but they had been left out in the cold too with laissez faire economics. They needed something, anything, to give them some hope. It was a mandate for something new, not any specific program. A mandate being like you win by such a large margin that they're behind you, man. 100%. Nobody can argue that you're not. Probably as much an anti Hoover as a pro Roosevelt vote. Little cooperation among the lame duck period. Uh, so between the time that Roosevelt wins the election and from the time that he uh, goes to inauguration, not much is done. Nobody's cooperating. Um, the campaign got nasty. Unwillingness of the Democratic Congress to make Hoover upstage Roosevelt. So if they passed stuff while Hoover was still in there, he would get the credit, not Roosevelt. So they weren't willing to do that. So rugged individualism. Here, Hoover's idea. There's his book, A Challenge to Liberty. The belief that all individuals, or nearly all individuals, can succeed on their own, and that government help for people should be minimal. This is up until the progressives, the tantamount belief of most Americans. This is going to change under the Great Depression. So FDR is going to offer direct relief, government funding that directly creates jobs. It got so bad right at the very beginning. You hire a guy to dig a hole, and then you hire another guy to fill the hole. Now that's an extreme an extreme example, but nonetheless, true example. And a lot of it was money thrown at it and missed the target. But remember, they were just trying to throw money at it to get the economy going again. They were trying to prime the pump. Now, with trickle down economics, that's going to the top. And if you poor people will spend the money, rich people will invest the money. Investment goes into corporations, into factories and into jobs, hopefully. Although we found in the RFC that's not where it went. And then those jobs create spending. Spending creates more jobs, etc., etc., and that starts the economy going. It's kind of like your starter motor starting the car, but it doesn't go for very long because it can't. You need to just get the economy going, then it'll run on its own. So, trickle down, providing tax cuts or other benefits to businesses, indirectly benefit the broad population. Very famous picture of FDR. You will see it again with the election of Obama in 2008. Time magazine will superimpose President Obama's face on FDR's face with a cigarette and everything there, because he was coming in same circumstances. So there's FDR. Truly amazing that he walked up to make that speech. Elected 4 times. And we have the New Deal. Take a look at the political cartoon here. Bank legislation, inaugural address, budget message, bank holiday, protection of gold. So you can tell this cartoon was really early on. Now, love this graphic. You want to know how the New Deal works? You got to know the 3 R's. Relief, recovery, reform. So you look at the programs and where do they fit? Many fit under more than one. Like for relief, we have the WPA or the PWA. That was just quickly throw out jobs. And then later on, throughout the Depression, create jobs. Making bridges and firehouses and roads and you name it, we'll talk about it. Recovery. Assist business and agriculture that they can get out of the Depression. And then reform. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Let's create specific laws, legislation, and agencies to regulate the U.S. economy. We are looking at a much larger role, especially in the reform area, for the federal government in America's economy. Now, probably the most influential First Lady of all time, well, at least second, would be Eleanor Roosevelt. You have to give it up for Edith Wilson. She might have actually been president. With the exception of Edith. Eleanor, by far the most powerful First Lady in power for 13 years. And she's the legs of FDR. We'll talk. FDR's eyes and ears, universally loved. She becomes the first U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So when we're talking about priming the pump, we're talking about deficit spending. Spending money you don't have. And here you got FDR playing with his programs. Now, fireside chats. This is the president directly talking to the people of the United States. It was a powerful tool. Powerful tool. I would put the equivalent of the first debate in television between Kennedy and Nixon. I would put this alongside with President Trump's power of tweeting, obviously changing the landscape of communications between president and citizens. So his fireside chats, everybody's waiting. Okay, we elected this guy, landslide. He can do pretty much what he wants. He hasn't told us pretty much what he's going to do. So let's listen. We need some hope. So he spoke weekly to the nation by radio and calmed everyone down during the bank holiday. His famous quote, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself." So FDIC is created. This is going to stop people from panicking. It says if your bank goes out of business, we got you covered. Now at the time in 1933, it's only $5,000. Today I think it's $500,000. But nonetheless, if you win the lottery, you win $1 million. How many bank accounts do you need at least? 2, because you're only insured up to $500,000 today. So this stops bank panics, bank runs. He's going to have a bank holiday, and he's going to examine the banks. Those that are shaky, they're done. President Obama will do President Obama and President Bush will do the very same exact thing. This is called the Glass-Steagall Banking Reform Act. What is it called? Glass-Steagall. Did he say Glass? He did say Glass-Steagall. And this provides for the FDIC. That is not all it provides for, but that's one of the big things, stopping the bank panic. Now, the AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Act. This is going to make available millions of dollars to help farmers. It is going to have a wide variety of programs, some very successful, some stricken down as unconstitutional, some very much failures. Paid farmers to reduce their crop acreage and eliminate price-depressing surpluses. So, pays you not to grow stuff and pays you for the extra. However, got off to a rocky start when it killed a lot of pigs for no good reason, and paying farmers not to farm actually increased unemployment. What are your farm workers going to do? What are the people who supply you stuff with going to do? I think about the ramifications. Oh, we're going to pay you not to build cars. Well, if there's no cars, you see the problem. And it will get stricken down by the Supreme Court in 1936, being one of the factors in the Supreme Court packing controversy. So here you got to look at the AAA. You got the South crushing out federal farm relief in the South, getting crushed because if you have tenant farmers or sharecroppers and you're getting paid not to grow stuff, you're going to kick the sharecroppers off your land. And look who gets screwed. All right, one of the most successful of all the programs was the CCCs, Civilian Conservation Corps, established in 1933. This is in the first 100 days of the New Deal. He's going to take 3 million young men out of the cities and put them out in the middle of nowhere, working out into the woods a lot of times. Now, you got to think what's going on there. A whole bunch of teenage to 21-year-old men with no possibility of finding a job, standing on the street corner in the middle of the night with nothing to do. Guess what's going to happen? Trouble. This is going to pull them off the street, provide them with a job, provide them with some training, provide them with some discipline, and it's going to send more than half of the money back home to mom who really needs it. He's got food, he's got clothing, he's got shelter. And so you take them out in the middle of a state park, how much trouble can they get in? Critics would say this was militarizing the youth and looked very similar to the Hitler Youth in Germany. I think that was probably overstating it, although the uniforms didn't do it any good. All right, probably the most successful of all the programs at the time was the TVA. Nobody can argue with the success of, see everybody in this area that was affected, the yellow area? Nobody can argue that the average person lived an extra 15 years longer. I am not kidding you. You give people electricity and hot water, and you will live longer, period. Standard of living, it's a fact. And that's what's coming to Tennessee Valley. So it's really got 3 big goals. Number 1, jobs. Number 2, help stop the flooding that's crushing the farmland. And number 3, provide electricity to poor rural America. So it's going to just affect this area, Tennessee Valley. You can see just a tiny bit of North Carolina. If you take I-40 and you cross this bridge, you will see right there a plant that's run by, still today, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Constructed dam on the Tennessee River, hydroelectric power, 2.5 extremely poor citizens improve their life and conditions. All right, the NIRA, National Industrial Recovery Act. We're going to have all companies get on board. Everybody's going to do the same thing so we can dictate it so we can get out of this depression. And the Supreme Court says, nah. Most complicated, it was designed to assist industry, labor, and unemployed. Maximum hours of labor, minimum wage, rights for labor union members, including the right to choose their own representatives for bargaining. You can recognize if you're a football fan, especially if you know some of the older Eagles helmets, that was designed to support the NRA. Shot down by the Supreme Court. So if you're going to look at just hold on to two pieces of SFI, that's enough. The AAA, well, they have the first AA and the second AA. So the first AAA and the NIRA, which formed the NRA. I know it's confusing. Here, National Recovery Administration was created by the National Industrial Recovery Act. So the NIRA creates the NRA, which is ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. PWA and the WPA, oh my God, how are you going to keep those two apart? WPA just has a heck of a lot more jobs. PWA does pretty much the same thing, except they do some projects that are a little bit more complicated. Like the WPA wouldn't take on a hospital because that's way too complicated for most anybody to build. The PWA would take it on. So PWA, industrial recovery, unemployment relief, 34,000 projects, not jobs, projects. Public buildings, highways, parkways. One of the key opponents and rivals of FDR was Huey Long, Kingfish from Louisiana, extremely popular. He says the New Deal didn't go far enough and came up with the Share the Wealth program, where every family would receive $5,000 from the rich. He legitimately rivaled FDR until he was assassinated in 1935. Father Coughlin, on the other hand, was a big opponent of the other. All right, second New Deal. He's done the first New Deal, a whole bunch of programs, thrown a bunch of money into it, priming the pump. The depression's still going on. All right, we need to do more. So these are more well thought out, long-term projects, the second New Deal. I mean, imagine being the president and getting this letter. My father hasn't worked for 5 months. Please, you do something. We haven't paid the gas bill and the electric bill. Haven't paid grocery bill. I have a sister. She's 20 years. She can't find work. My father, he's staying home. All the time he's crying because he can't find work. So the second New Deal, we talked about relief, recovery, reform. Now we're looking at a little bit more recovery and reform here. Some of the more long-term problems. Some of the ones who are most susceptible. The first ones in the Depression. The elderly, the poor, unemployed. So we're going to have new public works projects. Going to help the farmers and back the unions. Yes, here's a key turning point. We now have a friendly administration to labor unions. So here's a great graphic. If you want to screenshot it. You don't need to know all of them. You don't need to know every single AAA project, but you do have to have SFI for relief, recovery, reform, for the problems of unemployment, poverty, electricity, and standard of living. So unemployment, WPA, PWA, CCCs. Poverty, Social Security, first for the blind, then mothers, children. Electricity, you got to realize electricity raises the standard of living, raises the average age of life by 15 years just by adding hot water. It's a big deal. And I'm sure I don't have to convince you. And here's the tough one, the Wagner Act. The Wagner Act is also known as the NLRB. And don't quote me on that. FLSA. FSLA, my bad. Also known as the Wagner Act, it gave workers the right to collective bargain, minimum wage, 40-hour, I think it was actually a 44-hour work week, and outlawed child labor. Woohoo! It's finally been done. Woohoo! So the Wagner Act, if you have anything about child labor, then you got to know the Wagner Act. Okay, the WPA, very similar to the PWA. This was the #1 jobs program. 9 million jobs. Bridges, roads, high school students. I knew one kid, one was a kid in the Depression. One old guy I knew, one of his jobs was he went out there and counted cars. Yep, he'd go to intersections and he'd count cars for like 10 hours a day, he said. And he'd have to write them down, and that provided data for traffic. Today we got little strips that go across the road that count them. Back then, that's what he did. And they'd get college students to count cars. If you want to know a WPA project in Wallace, just go to the old post office. No longer a post office. Now they're a place, it's a brown building. Says they always got that lighted sign out front that says they'll buy gold. Anyways, above the door, that used to be the postmaster's door inside, if you go in that shop, you'll see a giant mural on the wall. It's a giant mural of a cow eating in a pasture amongst a whole bunch of hills. No such scene exists for hundreds of miles from here, but somebody who was an artist, they gave him a job and went around the post office and painted murals. We just need to give jobs, jobs, jobs. So here's Priming the Pump cartoon. You can see FDR pouring money into it. Now, when you do this, you're going to have leaks. Got to keep on dumping in until you finally get it pumping, till that economy gets going. Keep pouring in the money. But again, who's carrying the water? According to the cartoonist, the taxpayer. So John Maynard Keynes, I already introduced it to you once, believed in deficit spending. And boy, what a wonderful, wonderful tool to pick up if you're FDR. Here's an economist telling me to spend a bunch of money to fix the problem. All right. I can do that, and he does. Here's another one. And if you've ever been on the Intercoastal Waterway, New Deal project. Priming the pump. Of course, not with water, but cash. And hopefully out you get you get employment. Here again. All right, now here you got up till 2009. You can see TARP, where we went massive deficit spending. Since 2009, our deficit spending has made this look like nothing. Biggest problem your generation will be facing is there's a whole bunch of baby boomers who want tons of money, who voted themselves tons of stuff, but they've already spent the money they were supposed to save for it, and now they want you to pay for them. And they only had to pay for a small generation. You have to pay for the biggest generation in America's history. And there's very few of you. Good luck. So remember, old age, blind, handicapped children, you're going to get later on disabled. Here you got a President Bush cartoon, George W. Bush, Democrat Party represented up here. And he's got an idea to privatize Social Security. Says no, too risky. Is a very controversial issue. Not going over unions, Wagner Act, labor unions, Fair Labor Standards Act. We've already done it. Okay, labor union membership. Here's the results of friendly New Deal legislation. You're going to get a huge growth of unskilled labor in the CIO, who is going to merge with the AFL and along with the United Mine Workers. Then you're going to get government employees forming unions. Auto workers very successfully strike and will get huge benefits. Take a look at what they were getting in 2008. Now, with the AAA getting struck down and the NIRA getting struck down. Roosevelt's had enough, and he's got a plan. Really, in the Constitution, it doesn't say how many justices have to be on the Supreme Court, so why don't I get my Democratic Congress to authorize 6 more justices? Then I'll automatically, with the 3 I already have on the court, I'll automatically have a majority, and woohoo! Screw the Supreme Court. Now you can see from the cartoons, you got 2 different points of view. Here you got FDR trying to pull well, I'm sorry. Here you got FDR. He was going to pull Uncle Sam out of the water from the Depression, but it says, wait, I'm sorry, the Supreme Court says I can't do it and I have to throw you back. So you got one hand pulling him out while one throwing him back. Okay? So here this guy saying, man, look at the Supreme Court holding back FDR. Here you got who's upset, even who is upset about him pretty much trying to tip the balance of power between the Supreme Court, the 3 branches of the government, and basically own 2 branches. The Democrat Party, even they understand the ramifications of this action. This is going to really hurt him in the next elections of Congress. Another cartoon. I want 6 substitutes at once. Those fellows don't know it, but they're through. But I don't want them to take them off the field. So here you got the ingenious quarterback. Makes fun of FDR's court packing plan. And with the court packing plan and this rise in unemployment, you are going to get some nasty elections against FDR. Now, he'll hold majorities, but slim. So, conservative gains after this. I hope you've read this. Republicans pick up 7 Senate seats, 75 House seats. Democrats maintain a majority, but now everybody's New Deal support is pretty slim. So, setbacks. NIRA constitutional. AAA unconstitutional. Court packing in the 1937 downturn in the economy. I mean, we're in a depression here, but it looked better. We were getting better. Hey, man, what percent? We were down to, geez, what is this? 15% maybe? It's not good. Still a bad depression, but it's getting better. Now, can anybody guess why we're going down here? If you said World War II, you were correct. All right. Now, when we talk about the cabinet, we should not neglect the black cabinet. Coming through the back door, nonetheless coming into the White House, is Mary McLeod Bethune. Massively responsible for bringing many of the African Americans to the Democrat Party fold, which coalition still exists to this day, where more than 80% of African Americans in every presidential election vote for Democrat. So this is it right here. So do not forget Mary McLeod Bethune. Also, huge figure in education. Okay, SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, supposed to be the watchdog and make sure nobody's cheating at the stock exchange. This is Bernie Madoff, who took billions of dollars from people in a Ponzi scheme. Securities Exchange not watching. If you know what happened in 2007 crash, you know Securities and Exchange really dropped the ball. So are they an effective watchdog, or are they false security blanket like, slipped my mind. Was it false security like Kellogg Briand? Jeez, long day. Okay. So now he brings us into a welfare state where you can actually have the government cut your check from cradle to grave. Critics' view of Social Security. But with the country becoming 50% urban in 1925, things were changing. It used to be 3 generations live in the same farmhouse, and one takes care of the other. Now, families live in cities. People move. The families become much smaller. And the elderly have become more dependent. Okay, that was tough. Now, Roosevelt philosophy. 1. Believed in Keynesian economic theory of priming the pump. So I've gone over a lot of this. So this is a land of 5 notes, so let's hit it softly. First, primary function of government was economic stabilization. The role of deficit spending, you know what, I'm going to make this part 2. So I'm going to stop it right here and we'll start part 2.